Hello and welcome in to another episode of the FanTC Football Pod, coming at you with part two of our wide receiver draft strategy. Had a little bit of connectivity issues at the end of part one, so we'll be kind of wrapping up the stuff that we did not get to at the end of part one, which wasn't much. It was basically wrapped up there, and then we'll start with tier four, which is round four wide receivers, starting with wide receiver 21. That's DeAndre Hopkins, but quick point on we'll just kind of let's give a synopsis on our thoughts on round three real quick. I think we basically like all those guys, that being Devontae Smith, T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, Calvin Ridley, Deebo Samuel, Keenan Allen, Jerry Jeudy, Mari Cooper. All those guys we like in the third round as either your wide receiver one if you went heavy on the other positions, or wide receiver two in that round. I think we're really targeting wide receivers in round three overall, other than Metcalf for me, and then other than Metcalf, Deebo, and Jerry Jeudy for Kody.
You nailed it. Absolutely. So I think we're close to our 12 o'clock timeline. Let's see if we can run out these last couple of rounds of wide receivers here.
Let's do it.
Starting with tier four. Go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, a bit of a mini tier here. It's only four guys, but again, this is just the way the ADP broke here. They kind of live on their own bubble here in round four, that being DeAndre Hopkins at 21 of the Tennessee Titans, DJ Moore at 22 of the Chicago Bears, Drake London of the Atlanta Falcons at 23, and then Christian Watson of the Green Bay Packers at 24. All these guys are pretty polarizing. I think, you can find people that have pretty different opinions on a lot of these guys, but Kody, go ahead and give me a couple guys you're targeting here, or, if you are avoiding them, give me a reason why.
If I was avoiding them, it's because I do like the round four running backs currently just a little bit more. That's where Joe Mixon's currently at. That's where ETN currently is, and Aaron Jones. But out of this tier, I don't mind DJ Moore. I know I haven't been the highest on him, but I do think he is an ultra explosive player. If he's your wide receiver two or your wide receiver three in a zero RB or hero RB strategy, I don't hate that. Like, that's a lot of value there. I'm high on Christian Watson. I actually said in one of the mock draft videos, I think next year he's a guy who's going to be considered as a top. If he's at 24 right now, I'd push him up in the top 16 to 14 if Jordan Love is just average. I think he is a very high talented player. D-Hop, I don't know, man. I think he can be good still. It's not going to be based on talent. It's going to be based on volume, and that's fine for fantasy football. And if you want to take that shot, you can. He's just getting a little bit older. The Tennessee offense is going to run through Derrick Henry. Ryan Tannehill isn't the most accurate quarterback, and as much as I love Treylon Burks and Chris Okonkwo, I think that D-Hop's going to be the easy number one option for defenses to focus on in the passing game. So in obvious passing situations, third and long or whatnot, I feel like D-Hop's going to see a lot of double coverage and such. So I'm not too high on him. And then Drake London, I think you actually made this point when we were going over Kyle Pitts in our tight end disagreement show. If you're drafting Drake London here, you should just wait and draft Kyle Pitts where he's going as your tight end. Very similar players and in the same exact offense. You're just getting a couple rounds worth of value. So I will not draft Drake London in just about any league if he's getting taken at this ADP.
Yeah, you stole my point right out of my mouth. I was going to make about Drake London. Yeah, you did. Thank you. No, I appreciate it. But that's exactly what I was going to say about Drake London. I'm targeting Kyle Pitts later on if I haven't gone tight end to that point, rather than taking Drake London. Again, if you're dead set on getting a piece of this Atlanta passing game, I would rather wait and take the value on Pitts because he gets to be played at tight end. I don't love London in round four. I think maybe late round 5, round 6, his just talent and value becomes a little more interesting, but that's a pretty far drop in ADP. Hopkins, I agree. I think we remember the A.J. Brown days and say, hey, if there's a true alpha wide receiver in Tennessee, he can be successful. But what people may not remember is that Brown was very, very hyper efficient on the targets that he got. And I don't know if a 31-year-old DeAndre Hopkins is going to be as explosive down the field as that version of A.J. Brown was. So he's been more of a, like you said, a volume play these past couple of years. Is he really going to push much past 120, 125 targets in this offense that's going to lean on Derrick Henry? I'm not sure. I don't want to bet on it, and not in round 4. DJ Moore's really the only guy I like at value here. I'm not as high on Christian Watson as you. Has a lot to do with Jordan Love and the Green Bay offense. But I think Moore is the one wide receiver I'm really comfortable with in round 4, but I am, maybe pivoting towards a running back or targeting one of my quarterbacks in round 4 for the most part. I really like Fields here, like Herbert here. I like Jackson here. If he's a little later, I'm lower on Jackson, but I still see the upside. And Burrow falls into round 4. I'm fine with him too. So I think I'm either targeting quarterback out of one of those 4 tier 2 guys, DJ Moore, or one of the running backs we discussed in the previous episode.
Yeah, that's a fair point and a very important point, because that's basically right where that line of quarterbacks is going, is somewhere between 4 and 5. So
right in this range.
If you're sitting there, we're at the 45th,
that's why this tier is so small. Sorry to cut you off, but
no, you're all good. If you're at 45 or 46, and there's a Lamar Jackson, there's a Justin Herbert, a Justin Fields available, you have to consider them, even if you're someone who is completely against drafting quarterback that early. Those guys have league-winning potential from the quarterback position. That's actually a really good point. I guess that kind of makes me a little bit more iffy on Christian Watson, because I'd take every single quarterback over him at that point. So, if every quarterback's gone, I'd probably lean – honestly, DJ Moore and Christian Watson, I wouldn't doubt it if they have very similar seasons, very up and down. Just depends on how the offense is going on a week-to-week basis.
Agreed.
I think I'm just going to live or die by Christian Watson, just because I became such a big fan of him last year and got lucky with a week early call on him and picked him up in a bunch of leagues. But that's just being biased. That there's no statistical evidence behind that. I think they're very close to the same player on both iffy passing offenses. So either one's fine with me if one of them falls. But like you said, quarterback should be a big target in round 4.
Yeah, totally agree. I think this is the one round we're going to talk about that I am probably least likely to take a wide receiver at current ADP. Obviously, again, your home leagues may be slightly different. Maybe one of these round 3 guys falls into round 4 because there's quite a few of them. So if that's the case, jump all over it. But otherwise, I'm looking at Moore, and then the other guys I am not so keen on in round 4, looking for my QB and looking for maybe a running back value at that point. Let's go ahead and jump to tier 5. That is going to be rounds 5 and 6. We have a bit of a break in the wide receiver ADP here, so it kind of spreads out a little bit. So it's going to be both rounds 5 and 6. That is going to be Terry McLaurin at wide receiver 25, Christian Kirk at wide receiver 26, Chris Godwin at 27, Mike Williams at 28, Brandin Aiyuk at 29, Diontae Johnson at 30, Tyler Lockett at wide receiver 31, the perennially underrated Tyler Lockett. I think this is where my shift towards running backs really starts here, Kody. I don't have a ton of conviction about a lot of these guys. I think they're being drafted about where they should be, maybe a little bit too high. So I don't think there's any one of these guys that jumps out to me as a potential league winner. How do you think?
I 100% agree with you there. I'm not a big fan of this tier of wide receiver. Honestly, the only 2 names I look at, and I'm like, I want to get that guy at ADP, is Diontae Johnson and Tyler Lockett. You brought up a good point about Christian Kirk on our episode from Wednesday, going over news and notes, is where he may not be that involved. Terry McLaurin, you were negative about in our wide receiver disagreements. I'm not going to go too far into him, but it's just probably not going to be a very fruitful passing offense in Washington. Same thing in Tampa Bay. I mean, I guess I would take Chris Godwin if he fell to where Diontae Johnson and Tyler Lockett are going. I don't think he will. He's just a very risky pick he is right now going above or right out where Kenneth Walker, Javonte Williams, and Miles Sanders are going. I would take 2 of those guys easily over Chris Godwin, even though I think if last year I would never have said that with Tom Brady being there, but just Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask gives me no hope. And then Mike Williams, Brandin Aiyuk, I can't get behind the Brandin Aiyuk breakout year. I know that a lot of fantasy people on social media are all over that. I see people just talking about how they cannot stop drafting him. I don't get it. I mean, he's clearly the 3rd or 4th option on that offense, in an offense that doesn't really pass the ball down the field that much. I mean, they drafted Trey Lance to try and help them push the ball down the field, and it's been an absolute disaster. Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy are running the Kyle Shanahan offense. A lot of Debo, a lot of CMC, a little bit of Kittle mixed in, and then maybe a couple deep shots to Aiyuk. Maybe once a game, maybe twice a game if he's lucky. He's just a guy. He's basically on the AJ Brown track. He just doesn't do what AJ Brown does with the ball. He doesn't get very many opportunities, and I don't love drafting Brandon Aiyuk at all. I think it's wild he's going in this tier when you look at the running backs and tight ends that you could draft in this round. I kind of rambled there. So like I said, Diontae, Tyler Lockett are the only two I feel real good about. What about you?
Yeah, Deontay's the guy I really wanted to highlight here because I think he's a bit of a post-hype guy because he burned a lot of people last year. Famously did not score a touchdown on 147 targets, shattering the NFL record. I don't think that's likely to continue. I think a little bit of positive regression in that department and just from the Steelers passing game as a whole could do him very well. So in half and full PPR leagues, I'm all about Diontae Johnson. In non-PPR, I'm probably off of him and more on Tyler Lockett, like you said, in this range if I'm taking a wide receiver. So yeah, make sure that you obviously know your league format. Diontae gains a ton of value in anything PPR related. But yeah, the rest of the guys I'm not in love with. Christian Kirk I'm okay with if he falls to round 6. Don't love that he's jumped all the way up to round 5 in this ADP. Godwin, I do not like drafting wide receivers on what we project to be bad offenses. It's much tougher for wide receivers to have productive fantasy years on bad offenses than it is for running backs to have productive fantasy years on bad offenses. Just keep that in mind. So you have to kind of be bullish on Tampa Bay as a whole if you want to draft Chris Godwin and expect him to beat his ADP. Mike Williams, I don't mind. We just kind of know what he is at this point. He's going to be boom or bust. He's probably in about the right range these days. Was being drafted in more around 3-4 last year. He's kicked back to around 5-6. He'll have some value if you want to go boom bust, at your flex spot. I don't mind it, but he's just not my favorite player to draft in this range. I'll probably have a few shares of him, but not a ton. And then I echo Aiyuk. I think I actually like him a little more as a player than you do. But yeah, there's just such a crowded field of players in San Francisco. You're going to have to wait for one of them to get banged up. And if they don't, it's going to be, one or two guys every week. And the other two guys are probably going to miss out. So drafting somebody like that in round 5 or 6 is just a little too rich for me. Lean in running backs in this range or QB if one of the tier 2 guys falls and you haven't taken one yet. And then Johnson and Lockett in round 6 I am targeting. In half and full PPR especially.
Yep, I think we tend to agree. I don't want to echo everything you just said, so I agree with what you said. I think we're cool to move on to tier 6, which is round 7 of wide receivers.
It is full of wide receivers in round 7. This is where we get into kind of the exciting younger guys that don't have defined roles necessarily, but have some higher upside. I like this tier a little bit more than the previous one, especially from a value standpoint. So starting with Michael Pittman at wide receiver 32, Mike Evans at 33, George Pickens at 34, Marquise Brown at 35, Jackson Smith and Jigba of the Seattle Seahawks at 36, Gabe Davis at 37 of the Buffalo Bills, Jordan Addison of the Vikings at 38, and Jahan Dotson of the Commanders at 39. A lot of upside plays here in this tier. A lot of young first or second year guys or big play guys in the case of Pickens and Davis. Kody, how do you see this tier? Or do you like it? Are you targeting any of these guys in particular?
Yeah, I just want to throw out there our round 7 running backs were basically DeAndre Swift, James Conner, and David Montgomery. So it makes sense that there's a lot of wide receivers available in this tier. If I'm grouping the wide receiver and running backs as a whole, I want Marquise Brown or James Conner. In any kind of half or full PPR, I think Hollywood Brown's a league winner where he's getting drafted right now. Even if Kyler doesn't come back, I think he's good enough to be. Round 7, you're probably drafting him as either a flex or your wide receiver 3, depending on league format. And like I said, that's specific half and non-PPR, where I just think he's going to be able to survive off of targets. In non-PPR, I would not be on Hollywood Brown. I don't think they're going to be an explosive offense, and Colt McCoy's not going to be pushing the ball down the field. Other wide receivers I like. I don't necessarily love Michael Pittman, but I love that he's falling to the 7th round. I don't mind drafting him here, especially if you liked what you saw from Anthony Richardson. Mike Evans, I'm probably off unless it's just a specific roster build and he's just like a flex piece for me or something. But even at that case, I would take one of these young guys before I took Mike Evans, most likely anyway. Jahan Dotson is one of my favorites. We've highlighted him a little bit. And then Gabe Davis is actually one of my favorites as well. One of the breakout candidates from last year. And on Sleeper, I know he's been going actually a little bit later than round 7, but I have no problem taking him here. If just for all the reasons that he was a breakout candidate last year, except for now you're getting him in round 7 instead of round 4. He's still the number 2. He's a boomer bust, but if he's my flex boomer bust, I love that. I don't like my wide receiver 2 to be extremely boomer bust. So, JSN, I'm a little not skeptical of. The talent's through the roof. It's just a little, how's that offense going to look with the third wide receiver worked in? Or is it really just going to be DK and Tyler and JSN is just kind of worked in as a rookie and he doesn't have a defined role? And then I'll go ahead and just point out the last guy since I think I've hit on almost everyone. Jordan Addison, I'm a little bit scared about. I know that everyone just assumes he's immediately filling that wide receiver 2 role in Minnesota, and I understand why. I just think KJ Osborne might be a little bit better than some people are giving him credit for. I think Jordan Addison's obviously the much better play long term. But to start the season, it would not surprise me at all if KJ Osborne's lining up as the 2 wide receiver and Jordan Addison's kind of getting worked in as a rookie, similar to JSN. So for that reason, I'm probably a little bit scared of drafting Addison. But there's a chance that he's going to have just one amazing week with the Vikings and he's going to be the hottest waiver wire ad of the week. So he's a little bit of an iffy guy. Nick, what are your thoughts on this tier of running or wide receiver?
Specifically on Addison, just to continue that conversation, I think you make a good point there. Osborne's probably going to be more involved than people would want him to be, in the fantasy community especially. But I think with him and JSN, you're just hoping the talent plays out, especially, as we move through the season. So you might have to deal with a few rough weeks through, the first half of the season with those 2. But I think as the year moves on, as most rookie wide receivers do, they will get better and will be more productive down the stretch than they are to start the year. You might just have to, take some works with those guys on the bench for a little bit before you're able to really utilize them. I don't mind him, though, because I love the upside play of any rookie wide receiver, especially first-round picks, because those guys just have a tendency to outperform their ADP consistently.
For sure.
Beyond those 2 who I'm okay with in this range, Gabe Davis I like a lot. He's actually one of the reasons I'm not on Mike Williams. I kind of view Gabe Davis as a discount Mike Williams. He's on a really good offense. He plays the number 2 wide receiver role. He's the big play guy. I think they both have a lot of similarities and you can get him a round or 2 later. So I don't mind Gabe Davis in this range. Jahan Dotson's probably my favorite value, but you can most likely wait for him until rounds 8 or 9. As we've said before, the running backs are going to get pushed up in most home leagues and, most leagues that aren't really heavily emphasizing the wide receiver position, anything half or non-PPR, you're going to be able to get a Dotson a little later than this anyway. So you can wait a bit, but I like his value a lot. He's going 84th overall on NFC ADP right now. The other guys I'm not too bullish on. Pittman has kind of the same problem that Mike Evans and Chris Godwin do. If that passing offense is bottom 5 in the league, it is very, very hard for wide receivers to produce consistently in those type of offenses. Pickens, I don't love the player. He's a bit of a one-trick pony. I think he has really high upside if he, is able to widen his route tree a bit. But for now, he's basically just he runs a go route and he gets a couple shots a game, but doesn't have a ton of versatility beyond that. Marquise Brown's sort of the one pivot point guy where you got to make your call here. I like him. I think his upside is worth the risk here in round 7, but if Kyler Murray doesn't come back till week 8, it's probably going to be a rough ride with him until then. So you're just kind of hoping he comes back sooner than some people expect. But I like the later guys in this tier a little better in general, I think. Do you have anything else to add on anyone in round 7?
No, I think George Pickens is a good point just to bring up there because he's another guy. I think he scored an amazing touchdown, but he scored a pretty good touchdown in their preseason.
His highlight
game.
reel is fantastic.
Yeah, and let other people eat that up all day in drafts. Do not fall into the hype. My thing with George Pickens is every time I see a George Pickens highlight, he makes sometimes an easy catch look extremely difficult, and he pulls it off. Which is fantastic for him. But like the one I think earlier from training camp, like the ball hit him in his chest and bounced out and he had to dive and catch it. And it's like, I know we're all
Yeah.
happy he caught it, man, but like it's easier if you just catch it
Could've
with your
just
two
caught it,
hands
yeah.
in the first place. Like I don't really get that. So
Yeah.
I'd let guys like George Pickens, let other people take him. I mean, even if he does have a quote unquote breakout season, it's most likely just going to be to an outlier touchdown season. And
Yeah.
if someone hits
Exactly.
on that, that's fantasy luck. But if you're playing the numbers and you're playing, like a true fantasy player, you're not going to take your shot on very many of those guys.
Yeah, those type of guys are hard to project week to week as well. So they're harder to set and forget. You may have to, you might miss a couple of his big games, and then he finishes higher on the wide receiver board at the end of the year. But week to week, he may not help you so much because he has a lot of duds mixed in between. Same idea as Gabe Davis. I think you just make Gabe Davis a bit more of a known quantity, and the Buffalo passing game is much more of a known quantity. So you're not taking the risk that Pittsburgh, does not really progress as an offense. I think in this tier, basically, we're looking at I'm okay with taking the shots on the rookie wide receivers. Cody's a little more hesitant. I like Gabe Davis. I like Jahan Dotson. And I like Marquise Brown. I'm going to let somebody else most likely draft Michael Pittman, Mike Evans, and George Pickens. Do you have a quick synopsis on this tier?
I think you just crushed it right there. I think you nailed basically what I think as well. Let's jump into tier 7.
All righty, tier 7. This is rounds 8 and 9, guys. So right off the top here, Trey Burks at 40. He's probably going to fall a little bit after this injury news. Seems like he's avoided major injury, but week 1 status in doubt. I imagine he will be towards the end of this tier or maybe even into tier 8 that we will talk about in a bit. But for now, he's at wide receiver 40. Eli Moore of the Cleveland Browns at 41. Courtland Sutton of my Denver Broncos at 42. Brandin Cooks of the Dallas Cowboys at 43. Kadarius Toney at 44. Quentin Johnston of the LA Chargers at 45. Sky Moore of the Kansas City Chiefs at 46. Michael Thomas all the way down at wide receiver 47 of the New Orleans Saints. And then Zay Flowers, the rookie wide receiver for the Ravens at 48. How do we feel about this tier, Cody? I feel a lot of similarities to the previous tier as far as just kind of how this is structured.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, there's certain guys in this tier that I'm taking the shot on, and certain guys I'm probably avoiding like the plague. Elijah Moore, I'll take the shot on Elijah Moore here in round 8 or 9. He's gotten a lot of hype out of camp. It seems like him and Deshaun Watson are developing a little bit of chemistry, so
A lot of hype.
I don't mind taking that shot. Brandin Cooks, I actually do not mind taking the shot on Brandin Cooks. He had the infamous run where he never finished outside of a wide receiver 2 or 15 or whatever the number was for X amount of years.
Yeah.
Last year obviously fell, but he's also not on the Houston Texans anymore. I think he's going to have a good role in Dallas, especially here where he's a flex piece for you at this point. I'd take that all day. And then after that, I would consider Quentin Johnston. Not necessarily super bullish. Again, it's just another guy who's just in a heavy wide receiver room. At this point, I mean, there's almost no way he doesn't outperform his ADP at basically a wide receiver 4. Like, he's probably going to catch some touchdowns, or if he's even slightly involved, slightly fantasy relevant, he's going to finish higher than this. But the fantasy wide receiver that I love the most, that I've actually loved the most since draft night, is Zay Flowers. For me, I just think he has the most opportunity. Basically, right from day one, you have OBJ. Funny story, actually. Mike in our league actually just sent me OBJ for Austin Eckler. So if you saw me on my phone, it's because I got a draft or trade, and I was like, oh, let's see what this is. But
really quality stuff there.
Yeah, for me, I'm completely out on Odell Beckham Jr. There's no shot I'm taking him on any team.
Yeah, no.
And then when it comes to Rashad Bateman, I actually like Rashad Bateman. I think he's going slightly after Zay Flowers. So if I miss out on Flowers, I will take the shot on Bateman as well.
Yeah.
But my favorite rookie is Zay Flowers. I think he may have a Chris Olave effect where it's the first couple weeks of the year and he's immediately making an impact for fantasy.
Yeah, we talked about this tier in our running back preview a bit because we were comparing the round 8-9 running backs to these round 8-9 wide receivers, and I made the point that I like the fact that I'm going to be leaning towards these guys because a lot of them have a bit more upside than those running backs in that range. They don't necessarily need an injury to emerge. I think a lot of these guys, like even though Quentin Johnston's in a crowded wide receiver room, like you said, guys that are going to emerge, have a way of just kind of making opportunities for themselves. We saw that with Garrett Wilson last year, I think. We had Corey Davis, we had Elijah Moore. It was a bad passing offense, but Wilson's talent won out, and he ended up being the one in that room because he was just better than everybody else there. So I'm not saying Johnson is that talent, but he is a first-round pick for a reason, and he's on a really good passing offense. So there's opportunity there. And then I love Flowers as well. Not going to belabor that point. I think you kind of pointed everything out that I would want to say. I mean, they're switching to more of a heavy passing attack this year. He's a first-round pick, profiles well with Lamar Jackson's skill set. I think I would lean towards those guys over guys like Courtland Sutton and Brandin Cooks, unless you had just gone crazy heavy with the volatility early in your draft. Those guys, Sutton and Cooks, are probably not going to win your leagues, whereas the guys like Johnson and Flowers, even Sky Moore, have a lot more chance to break out as top 15 wide receivers. We kind of know what Cooks and Sutton are at this point in their career. If you need a really solid wide receiver 3 that's going to give you some, decent production every week, those are guys you can lean into. But otherwise, I am hoping to take my shot on one of these rookies and hopefully hit a home run in round 8 or 9.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have any other wide receiver from this tier you want to hit on? Because I'm going to make a point about Sky Moore, but I'll probably roll it into the next tier if you don't have anything else you'd like to say.
I don't think so. Other than Burks would have been on that list as well. Disappointing that knee injury happened. We just have to figure out what's going on there. If he's somehow healthy for week 1 and good to go, I'd throw him in the tier with Flowers and Johnson. But that knee injury probably scares me off of him in this range.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a great point. And honestly, a really good point about Brandin Cooks and Courtland Sutton, because I've taken Brandin Cooks in a couple of mocks, and I may actually go back and look at some of those because I think you're right. You want to be shooting for league winners here, not just a guy that honestly Brandin Cooks ended up becoming a roster clog at some point because you're not going to win your league with him in your flex, but is your round 14 guy or the guy you picked up off the waiver a better option? Probably not. So it's kind of one of those like you get yourself stuck in fantasy, which I think is a really good point. But my point on Sky Moore, I went to the Royals-Cardinals game out here in Kansas City. I was talking to a few guys that went to some Chiefs practices, and they had mentioned to me that Sky Moore has basically developed into somewhat of a gadget guy on the Chiefs offense. And whereas they saw Rashee Rice just involved in the more, play-to-play offensive system for Andy Reid. Now, I've been under the impression that maybe Sky Moore, just the offensive system in general is a lot to take in. Maybe it takes a year for rookies to get used to it. These guys seem to be pretty convinced on the other side of that Sky Moore may just be a gadget guy. Maybe wasn't the best pick where he was taken. And Rashee Rice is the wide receiver you may want for Kansas City.
Interesting.
I still don't know how I feel personally about that. I'll wait for – the preseason games are kind of iffy for the Chiefs because Mahomes is probably going to be there for a drive, but it doesn't really matter that much. So it's a little interesting for me. Obviously, we have Rashee Rice, the 61st wide receiver, going at 149 in the draft. So, like I said, basically free at the point where you're drafting them. But it made me think a little bit on Sky Moore. I'm going to have to do some more research on that and maybe see if I can find some more beat reporters maybe echoing that sentiment or maybe going the other way. But they seem pretty convinced that Rashee Rice is looking like the potential breakout wide receiver for the Chiefs this year.
Look at that boots on the ground work by reporter Cody there, going to the source to get his information. Hey, I'm all for it. I've kind of been skeptical about Sky Moore as a player to this point anyway because of it's really you just don't really see guys that have that little of production in year 1 like break out to any sort of degree that would create wide receiver 20 or better value necessarily. So I like that kind of reaffirms the thoughts I had on him anyway. So I appreciate the insight from Cody there in Kansas City, boots on the ground at the Royal Stadium, hitting up the Kansas City Chiefs scouts. But that's good stuff right there. I like that a lot. I don't know if I'm not going to go through all these names. There's 15 guys in round 10 plus. Again, this will probably be in the episode description. So if you really want to see all the guys that we're talking about, you can go ahead and look through them. But I'm not going to name everybody here. Cody, just give me 2 or 3 of these guys. If there's more that you're convicted about, go ahead and expand that. But give me 2 or 3 of these guys at least that you like targeting in rounds 10 plus as flyers.
Yep, I know there's one guy here at number 54. I'm not gonna talk about because I've stolen a couple of your guys throughout. So I do agree with him though. I think he's going to be a good pick. And then otherwise, I'm going to be considering Rashee Rice now just based off of that information. And then when I look down the rest of this list, I mean, Jameson Williams is interesting. You just have to be able to hold him for 6 weeks, which really puts you in a roster bind, especially if you have to deal with, other.
No IR is tough. It's really tough.
It makes it difficult. You basically lose an entire bench spot for 6 weeks. And then when he comes back, do you feel comfortable just immediately throwing him in there? No. So you're probably wasting a bench spot for 7 to 8 weeks before you finally feel good enough with Jameson Williams. Juju, no thank you. That's a floor play. Romeo Doubs, I don't hate, but I still think pretty much a floor play just based on the Green Bay offense. Okay, I'm going to quit saying all these out loud. You said just 2 to 3. Rashad Bateman would be the one. I know I've already mentioned him with the other tier, but he would definitely be – I think I'd go Rashee Rice and Rashad Bateman, and then the guy you're going to say as my 3 main targets. I think the rest of these guys in this tier are pretty much just floor plays that, are kind of just into the roster guys. If an injury happens, they can be more relevant, but as you're drafting them, they're just depth pieces.
Sure. Rashad Bateman, I like that call quite a bit. I think when he's on the field, he's been a really good player. Obviously had trouble staying healthy, but if Baltimore stays true to their word and really opens up the passing game, I think there might be room for 2 or even 3 fantasy relevant pass catchers there, with Mark Andrews obviously being one, and then either Flowers or Bateman being the other 2 there. Then Beckham, we're kind of off. I think we both agree there. Nico Collins is the guy that we want to mention here. He's at 54, 123 overall, very late round pick, somebody that I think has a chance to be a number 1 on his team. Again, we want to take shots on unknown situations because those unknown situations create potential value. I think if Collins ends up being the number 1 guy for Stroud and he comes out and plays a little better than maybe we're expecting as a rookie, this could be a guy that could push for 7 or 8 targets a game and be a really valuable piece for you, and it does not cost you much in the draft. I think based on previous production, he is the guy I would expect to be the number 1 here in Houston. Not set in stone, but there's a reason he's at wide receiver 54, Cody. So not a bad shot to take late in your draft. And then the other guy I want to mention is DJ Chark. He is even later. He's at wide receiver 64. He's on the Carolina Panthers these days, catching passes from Bryce Young. Basically, I'm going to echo every single point I just made about Nico Collins, but move it over to DJ Chark, and he's also a couple rounds later. So same situation, a lot of ambiguity in that Carolina Panthers wide receiver room. A lot of opinions on who's going to be the number 1, but you might as well take your shot on one of them late in your draft, and you have a chance to have a guy that will lead his team in targets as opposed to some of these other guys he's going around like KJ Osborne, Rondale Moore, Tyler Boyd. These guys, they're not going to lead their team in targets other than, barring massive injuries ahead of them. So DJ Chark has a chance to be that guy with no injuries at all. We like guys in those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have a guy I do want to bring up, John Mechie, also in Houston. I want to see him in the last couple preseason games. I would not mind spending my last round pick on him. A big school
Same
guy,
reasons.
went to Alabama. Nico Collins went to Michigan, both big school guys.
He was a second round pick.
Yep, second round pick.
Decent capital. Yeah,
has good capital. Guy. Obviously missed last season with I think
it was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It was some form of cancer, but he's all medically cleared, good to go.
He's all good. Did he play in the first preseason game for him? I can't remember.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think he did.
Okay. But he's definitely someone who's on my radar. I've been picking him up in a lot of best ball leagues. Not necessarily, calling for the breakout or anything, but when I'm looking at this late of a wide receiver, I would rather take the shot on it, John Mechie, as a potential breakout as opposed to Juju Smith-Schuster or Jacoby Myers, Alan Lazard. Darnell Mooney actually all the way down here is a little bit interesting.
I was going to mention him actually. Yeah.
He is definitely a little bit interesting. Just if that offense can get unlocked a little bit and Justin Fields looks a little bit better as a passer, not everything's going to go to DJ Moore. So if they're throwing the ball more in general, Mooney's going to get involved. So he's actually, I completely overlooked his name. He's interesting. But any other names you want to call out? Anything not on the list or on the list you want to mention?
So Darnell Mooney was the guy I was going to bring up there, so I'm glad you did. I am going to take a quick look at the ADP here and make sure there's no one that I'm missing. But yeah, like you said, Darnell Mooney's had some impressive target numbers his first couple years in the league, and if that passing offense becomes, if that pie becomes bigger in the passing offense in Chicago, he could be interesting as probably the clear number 2 target getter in Chicago. But I don't think there's anybody else that I really want to mention. I think you can just kind of piggyback off what we said about the Houston and Houston and Carolina situations. Any of those guys you like, whether it's Jonathan Mingo in Carolina or Tank Dell in Houston, take a shot on some of these guys that could be legitimately the number one target earners for their teams, as opposed to the Tyler Boyds of the world that, they're going to probably be more productive on a week-to-week basis, but they're not going to win you your league or even be week-to-week starters.
Absolutely. Well, sweet. Nick, I think we're about 2.5 hours in. So a shout out to the boys for knocking out these podcasts for the people. Again, if you listen to this one, you haven't checked out the running backs. That one was posted yesterday. We also got quarterbacks. We got tight ends out there. We got mock drafts going up on the YouTube just about every single day. So make sure to check those out. Short form content as well. TikTok, Instagram, Reels. We're gonna be pumping it out. I'm gonna try and get this thing rolling as much as possible before football season gets here. Get the clan growing a little bit and see what we can do with this bad boy. So let us know what you guys think in the comments. Is there anyone that we were down on that you're high on? Anyone that we're high on that you think is gonna have a bad year? Let us know what you guys
disagree with us, guys. We love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Hit us up on social. Let us know we had a bad take or we sounded dumb while we were explaining something. Honestly, good feedback like that would honestly be wonderful because we do not get enough
Any engagement
of it, I would
is
say.
fine.
So, absolutely. But cool, Nick, I will talk to you later, brother. I am heading out, going to bed. Peace out.